You think Jesus didn't have faith? He absolutely had faith. And that's why he was able to put his will aside and agree to do the will of the Father, even when he wanted to do something different. And yet he submitted his will, he changed his will to match the will of the Father. That's a true servant of God, where you have the selfless actions of love. That's what you're doing with your life. Look at me. If you've been watching my videos, you know that's true. You know that that's what's going on. I want to talk with you about the Garden of Gethsemane and what happened between the will of the Father and the will of Jesus as fully man and fully God. Let's read the accounts. There are 4 of them. This is so important of an event. All 4 of the authors of the accounts of Jesus recorded. So we're going to read all 4. We're going to do it kind of briskly, and I'm going to comment on it. So Matthew 26. Then Jesus, this is verse 36. Matthew 26, verse 36. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, "Sit here while I go and pray over there." And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, Jacob and John. And he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me." He went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, "O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping and said to Peter, "What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, a second time, he went away and prayed, saying, "O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done." And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away again, and prayed the 3rd time, saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." And while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude, with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now his betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "Whomever I kiss, he is the one, seize him." Immediately he went up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. But Jesus said to him, "Friend, why have you come?" Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. All right, so let's go to the next one. Next one's in Mark 14. Verse 32. Mark 14, verse 32. Then they came to a place which was named Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And he took Peter, James, and John with him. That's Jacob, not James, of course. And he began to be troubled and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch." He went a little further and fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will. Then he came and found them asleep and said to Peter, Simon, are you sleeping? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Again he went away and prayed and spoke the same words. And when he returned, he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. Then he came the third time and said to them, Are you still sleeping and resting? It is enough. The hour has come. Behold, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. And immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. Now his betrayer had given them a signal, saying, Whomever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him and lead him away safely. As soon as he had come, immediately he went up to him and said to him, Rabbi, Rabbi, and kissed him. Then they laid their hands on him and took him. Let's go to the next one. Next one's Luke 22. Luke 22, verse 40. When he came to the place, he said to them, Pray. Well, it says, coming out, he went to the Mount of Olives as he was accustomed, and his disciples also followed him. When he came to the place, he said to them, Pray that you may not enter into temptation. And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Then an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. And the like means as. So it could be that they actually turned into blood, or they may not have. When he rose up from prayer and had come to his disciples, he found them sleeping from sorrow. So they were sorrowful and caused them to sleep. Then he said to them, Why do you sleep? Rise and pray, lest you enter into temptation. And while he was still speaking, behold, a multitude, and he who was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them and drew near to Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said to him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? When those around him saw what was going to happen, they said to him, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? And then it goes on to that part. Okay, let's go to the next one. John 18. That one had an angel in it, and the sweat like drops of blood. John 18. Verse 1, right at the beginning. There it is. Okay. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. And Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. Then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, Whom are you seeking? They answered to him, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said to them, I am he. And Judas, who betrayed him, also stood with them. Now when he said to them, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. And that's interesting. Then he asked them again, Whom are you seeking? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I have told you that I am he. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way, that the saying might be fulfilled which he spoke of those whom you gave me, I have lost none. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant. And it goes on into that. Okay? So this doesn't have the part about praying. But the other three do. What's very interesting is what Jesus says in his prayer. He says, may this cup pass from me, may this hour pass, but not my will, but your will be done. Now, did God the Father force him to submit to his will? He didn't, did he? Was he convinced by the Father to submit to the Father? He was, because he knew everything that the Father spoke to him, and everything that he himself did was the Father. So he did only what he saw, he said. He spoke only what he heard. So he was convinced by the Father. And remember, the word for faith in the Greek literally means persuasion, conviction, being convinced. You think Jesus didn't have faith? He absolutely had faith. And that's why he was able to put his will aside and agree to do the will of the Father, even when he wanted to do something different. And yet he submitted his will, he changed his will to match the will of the Father. After speaking to the Father that what he wanted was something different. Okay? But when he decided that, look what happened. A chain of events were released. The chain of events actually followed through. Now, if he hadn't, would the chain of events happened? Probably not. There are things that the Father determines to do. There are chain of events that happen to cause it to come to be. But there's this interaction between those things and our choices as well, especially when we are a servant of God, a real servant of God, who's been crucified with Christ, who no longer lives, but Christ lives in you. That the life you live in this body, you live by faith in the Son of God, persuasion in the Son of God, who loves you and gave himself for you. That's a true servant of God, where you have the selfless actions of love. That's what you're doing with your life. Look at me. If you've been watching my videos, you know that's true. You know that that's what's going on. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't benefit from some things while I'm here. But I'm here, right now I'm here, as of the time the war broke out. I am here for selfless reasons. And I'm also calling you to imitate me. Give up your life for Christ. Stop playing some version of your life like it's a video game. Give up your life for Christ. Let him call you. Let him lead you. Let him give you glorious things to do. That you have glory to give back to him. Because right now you're naked and you're blind and you're poor and you're wretched. And you've got nothing. And I'm rich. And I am not naked. I'm dressed in fine linen. And I'm calling you to do the same. I'm imploring you. I'm really begging you to do the same. Not only for Christ's sake, which is enough, but for the sake of the people who are waiting for you and what you're going to do. You are God's hands and feet. When the economy of the Holy Spirit works through you in the selfless giving of agape love, that charitable godly love that doesn't seek for itself, when that moves, when you act through that, hearts are changed permanently. They really are changed permanently. Everyone's watching you. Everyone's watching you. Especially if you call yourself a Christian, everyone is watching you very closely. So you must be sincere. You must be pure in your heart. You must come to the garden. You must come to the garden. You must get on your knees. You must be praying and struggling with that will of yours, which is so cantankerous, so obstinate, so rebellious, so selfish. You must be struggling with it and wrestling with it as Jacob wrestled with the angel all night long and said, I'm not letting you go until you bless me. That is the only way ahead in Christ. And you need to choose this day who you will follow. Because right now, your calling is to the garden on your knees to struggle in prayer with drops of sweat, even as if they were blood. But you've never gotten there because you're too lazy and you're too selfish. You're too scattered. You can't focus because you've never given your life for Christ. And I ask you, does Christ live in you? Does he really live in you? And if you don't know, then this is your garden call. Come to the Garden of Gethsemane. That was the triggering point, the tipping point for the passion of Christ. That's where it all cascaded from. When Jesus submitted his will this last time to the Father. He'd done it many times before. This was his final call. Will you do this for me? Will you go to the cross? Will you do it? Will you go? What would have happened if Jesus wouldn't have gone? That is a terrifying question to ask. But I thank God that he did. And how many people are going to thank God that you submitted to the Father's will in the garden? I hope it's not going to be that terrifying question. What if you didn't? I hope it's going to be praise and glory and thankfulness to God from many people because you submitted to the Father's will in the garden. May the Lord bless you as you seek him with all your heart.